Place Between, Part 1. The veil sat lightly that day. It was not absent, was never absent, but gentle enough that Edgefield carried on as it always did. It softened distance and swallowed sharp horizons, gathering in the low places, thinning where the sun worked hardest, lingering in quiet solitude over the South Mountains. It was a normal day, and so it went unnoticed. In Edgefield, as in most human towns, the veil was nothing more than weather. Emily walked the river road with 2 baskets of beans biting at her fingers, the woven handles cutting into the tender places between knuckles and palm. Old leather straps held the weight across her shoulders, worn soft with use. She kept her eyes on the path because that was what you did. You watched for loose stones and shallow holes, for carts and horses, and other people who did not always have the space to move aside politely. The farms around here were hungry farms. They did not rest, and mouths did not wait. Rows were cleared and replanted as soon as the crops were taken, the soil never given a chance to pause and exhale. And still it gave. Beans, gourds, squash and spinach grew quickly and filled bellies. They travelled well enough in sacks, barrels and boxes and never asked to be cherished. Emily had picked the beans the day before until her back became a single long ache, until her hands smelled green no matter how many times she rinsed them. Then she slept, because that was all that was left to do. Now she walked. The loading shed waited further down the road, a timber shed with a leaning roof and a ledger nailed near the door. Farmers came and went, produce changed hands. Someone counted, someone scowled, someone else hauled it toward carts that would eventually make their way to the lake village and beyond, towards road that led to mines and larger towns and cities that never grew anything with their own hands. Emily did not think much about those places. Thinking too far away felt like a kind of disobedience. But she did think about books. She thought about them in everything she did, in small ways, just enough to let the work pass. To rest her mind on something that did not smell of earth and sweat, something that did not measure her worth in baskets. She would close a book and stare at the ceiling of her sleeping loft, letting the idea of somewhere else press softly against her heart. Then she would wake the next day and return to picking beans or stacking gourds. That was how life worked, and it had not occurred to her to question it. The road in front of her bent near the river. Water ran down from the mountains and turned gently here, slowed by stones and reeds in the winding land. On the other side of the river the trees thickened quickly. It was not that scattered, obedient shape trees planted on farm edges do, but the untended kind that did not care about property lines. Emily stopped beneath an old tree where the roots rose like knuckles from the soil. It was not her usual stopping place. There were better ones. But her arms were trembling and the baskets were heavier than normal, and the shade felt like an offered hand. She lowered the beans, letting the old straps slip from her shoulders, and set the baskets carefully so they would not spill. With the weight gone, she sank down to the ground and leaned her back against the bark of the tree. She sat and drank from her flask slowly, the water cool against the heat of her body. Above her, a bird called, bright and sweet, and Emily's attention lifted with the sound. The bird stood vivid against the softened sky, hopping along a branch with its head tilted, interested in something only it could see. Emily smiled without thinking. When it fluttered across the river and landed on a broken limb being reclaimed by the forest edge, her gaze followed. The smile lingered as her attention caught on something beyond the water, something almost swallowed by trees and brush where the forest thickened. Stone. Not river stone, not the scattered rock of the mountains. A broader shape, a curve that felt out of place. It did not look new, but old and broken, long forgotten, and yet intentionally shaped. Emily narrowed her eyes, her breath holding as she watched the shape, as though it might shift if she blinked. For a moment she thought of her books, of hidden places and lost treasures. Then she reminded herself how foolish that was, especially in a farming village where the biggest secret was whether someone watered down their ale. When she finally stood to get a better look, the shape vanished behind branches, brush and distance, gone so completely she wondered if she had invented it out of fatigue. Emily stared across the river anyway, maybe wishing, maybe simply stubborn, but she saw nothing, only trees, mist and stone behaving like stone. She exhaled and shook her head as though breaking a spell, then picked up her baskets and returned to the road and her duty. She delivered the beans to the loading shed, watched them being weighed and lodged. She listened to the bickering and the scratch of pencil. She even nodded when spoken to and kept her answers small. Then she turned back toward home with empty baskets. The tree waited where she had left it, inviting in a completely new way. She told herself she would not stop again, that such nonsense belonged only in books, but she stopped anyway. She lowered herself into the same place, her back against bark, her imagination held firmly in check. Her eyes drifted toward the bird's branch as though the moment might repeat itself. And it did. Not the bird, that would have been too neat. Instead, the same shaped stone, suddenly clear, visible only from this angle. Her heart skipped, excitement flickering, but beneath it something else, a pull, a beckoning. She looked upstream where the river widened and the stone rose above the water, revealing a shallow crossing, a place where a person could step carefully and reach the other side without being swept away, if they were willing to accept wet hems and cold feet, that is. Emily looked at it for a moment, then back at the shaped stone. The thought arrived fully formed and faintly annoying. She could just look, not a plan nor an adventure, just a look. She walked along the riverbank to the shallow place, removed her shoes, held them in fist and crossed carefully. The stones were slick beneath her feet, the water cool enough to make her shiver, but she reached the other side without trouble. She pulled her shoes back on over wet, cold feet and stood, breathing in. The air felt different, neither colder nor darker, just different. The trees here did not open for roads, the bushes did not politely stay trimmed back. Emily stepped onto a faint animal path and followed it toward the shaped stone. She pushed through brush that snagged at her skirt, moving carefully. She had no wish to meet a wild boar or a mountain cat or anything else that would not care that she was a farmer's daughter with bookish thoughts. She stopped at a low stone face, unremarkable and close. For a moment she thought she had been wrong. There was no ruin, no opening, only rock, moss and branches. Still she moved left, squeezing along the stone, and saw it. A break in the stone, a curve that did not belong to erosion. As she moved further along the stone, a broader opening revealed itself, half swallowed by time. Not a cave in the wild sense, but something that had once been made, shaped, intended. Moss filled the seams, roots threaded through the stone, but the shape remained unmistakable. Emily stood at the threshold, peering inside. The opening was large enough that the sunlight reached far in, turning dust to gold. The interior did not look like the kind of darkness that could hold teeth. It looked like the kind of darkness that simply held silence. Still, Emily lingered where sun could still touch her feet. She was about to turn, already leaning toward what was sensible, when something flickered in the air. A small light, suspended, drifting. Emily's breath hitched and her body jolted backward. One foot slid on loose gravel and she caught herself against the stone, her heart suddenly loud. Before she could decide to run, the light bobbed closer, and she saw that it was not a lantern, nor a reflection, and clearly not a firefly. It was simply a light. A floating glow, faint and pale, like a small piece of soft moonlight caught and held in the air. Emily swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she said, voice too loud against the stone. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know this was here." The light paused, as if considering her words. Then it drifted closer, without aggression and without threat, just curious, like an animal that had never seen a human. Emily felt ridiculous standing there apologizing to a light. "Hello," she added, because once you begin being ridiculous, you may as well commit to it. The glow pulsed once, the faintest suggestion of response. Then it drifted deeper into the carved space, slow, almost like an invitation, or at least that was how Emily understood it. She hesitated. Her mind urged her to leave. Her feet argued for one more step. In the end, curiosity won, and she found herself following. She moved only a short distance, far enough to leave the entrance behind her, but not so far that the sun was lost entirely. Her eyes stayed on the glow until it slipped into a narrow crack in the collapsed stonework and vanished as though that were perfectly reasonable. Emily froze. Darkness gathered, not complete, just dim enough that her eyes needed time. She waited. She breathed. She listened. Slowly the space above her opened into a high ceiling, not intact, not grand, but shaped in a way that suggested intention. It felt almost like a small cathedral carved into rock, though the word cathedral belonged in places Emily had never seen. Still, she could not find another word that fit. The structure had collapsed inward over time, stone folding into itself where a passage had once continued. Moss and shadow had settled into the gaps, and whatever this place had been was gone now, but what remained held a quiet, enduring grace. Emily's heartbeat slowed, steadier now than it had been at the entrance. Instead, awe crept in, replacing fear. This had been something, a home, perhaps, a gathering place, a carved village wall, a doorway into deeper rooms now buried. Emily stood very still, scared movement might disturb the air's memory. The mist was present here in a way that it had not been on the road. Not fog-thick, but listening thick. Emily turned toward the far corner of the chamber where the light seemed almost wrong, where the air held a denser hush and the mist gathered by choice rather than drift. The mist moved, almost parted as a shape stepped out. It was not fully formed nor clear, only person outlined, a suggestion of shoulders, limbs, a head, no face, only a softened blankness, like a figure seen through rain. Emily's stomach dropped. She did not scream. She did not run. She did not think she could, even if she wanted to. She simply froze. The form remained still, unchanging, unthreatening, as if it had been standing there for a long time and simply had not been noticed until now. "Who are you?" it asked. The voice was low, unshaped, uninviting, but not unkind, simply there. A voice that did not yet know how to shape itself. Emily remained still. My name is Emily," she said quietly. I didn't mean to come in. I saw the stone and I thought it might be nothing." The form tilted, a subtle shift as if it was trying to see her more clearly. Emily took one step backward, careful not to trip on rubble. "I'm sorry," she repeated, softer this time. "I'll go. I won't come back." The form moved one step forward, slow and deliberate, closing the space between them slightly. Suddenly, Emily could see the outline better, the curve of a waist, the line of a neck, the unmissable presence of someone who had once been someone, even if the features had blurred. The form spoke again. "Have you seen Oren?" Emily swallowed. "I don't think so," she said carefully. "Who is he?" Her mouth moved before sense could stop it. The form hesitated, not like someone searching for an answer in memory, but like someone listening for a sound that did not arrive. "I don't know," it said at last. Silence pressed in. Emily stood there, breathing, a little too shallow, eyes fixed on the shape. It did not move, it did not press her, it simply waited, as though an answer were expected, one she did not have. The moment stretched until even the air felt tense. The waiting grew uncomfortable, not because anything changed, but because she became aware of how much had not. The stillness, the mist gathering too close, the presence before her that did not behave like anything she knew. Her senses caught up all at once and found nothing familiar to hold on to. Emily stepped backward again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words came without knowing what they were for. Perhaps for not knowing Oren, perhaps for entering, or perhaps for being somewhere she was not meant to be. The form did not respond. It did not beg. It did not accuse. It simply remained, as if leaving was not an option it remembered. Emily turned and walked toward the entrance, toward the river, toward the path, toward the world that pretended it was whole. While she did not run, she also did not linger. When her feet finally touched the river stones again, she realized her hands were shaking. She crossed back with her shoes clenched in her fist, breath thin, her mind caught somewhere between disbelief and a strange, aching tenderness she did not yet know how to name. With the river behind her and the path familiar beneath her feet, her breathing slowed, and the world gradually returned to its ordinary weight as she walked home. She did not tell anyone, not her parents, not the neighbours. There were things that belonged in books, and there were things that people laughed at when spoken aloud, and she had no wish to be mistaken for foolish. Still, the encounter did not loosen its hold. Days passed, and when she found herself once again on the road with baskets in hand, Emily realized something with a kind of reluctant clarity. Pretending nothing had happened was no longer possible. She had, however, hoped the memory would fade into the background of her life. That was how such things were meant to behave. Strangeness would soften with sleep, with work, and slowly drift into distance. It did no such thing. Instead, it settled, just enough to be ever-present. Emily found herself thinking of the cavern while doing other things, tying bundles of beans, planting squash, scrubbing dirt from beneath her nails, even while listening to her mother talk about weather. She told herself she needed to forget, to let it drift into the soft, unreliable place where memories fade and can be dismissed as dreams. Soon enough, her feet found the same path again, the same baskets heavy with beans, the same sun filtered through the mist, the same tree waiting ahead with its familiar promise of shade and rest. She did not stay long enough to see the stone. She didn't want to give her thoughts any freedom. Instead, she stood with her back against bark and drank, rested, and moved on. The following week, she found herself seated against the old tree again, hands idle, her gaze drifting where she had told it not to. The stone revealed itself as before, quiet and patient, unintrusive, and still she felt the pull of it, faint but insistent. Emily exhaled, slow and controlled, calming herself before her legs did what they had already decided. There was no longer any point pretending she would stop them. She walked to the river crossing, removed her shoes, stepped into the cool water, and crossed as before. On the other side she followed the same animal path, slipped along the same stretch of cliff, until she stood once more before the cavern. Light still reached into the cavern's mouth, the stone still bore the same quiet injuries. The mist gathered just enough to blur the edges today, but not enough to hide the truth of what this place had once been. Emily lingered at the threshold again, listening, watching. She did not announce herself this time. Instead, she stepped inside, careful to keep the entrance behind her. The air shifted, the mist rose slightly, revealing the presence that was already there, almost like it had not moved from where Emily had last seen it, completely unchanged. The form turned toward her. "You came back," it said. Emily blinked again, not from surprise so much as recognition. "I did," she said. I hope that's all right." The form considered this, or perhaps it did not. It was difficult to tell what thought looked like when thought had lost all edges. "I am still here," it said instead. Emily nodded. "I can see that." She waited for something else to follow. It did not. Silence settled between them, thick but not uncomfortable this time. Emily became acutely aware of her own breathing, of the scrape of stone beneath her shoes, of the distant sound of water moving beyond the cave walls. At last she spoke again. "Can I ask who you are?" The question landed badly. She saw it immediately, the way the form stilled, the way the mist around it tightened, as though the words had brushed against something raw. "I don't know," it said, and this time the voice carried strain. Emily winced inwardly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "I am here," the form said again, firmer now. "I am meant to be here." "For what?" Emily asked softer. The form hesitated. The pause stretched, not with thought but with pressure, as though the answer existed somewhere unreachable. "Oren," it said finally. "I must find Oren." Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them again, she tried a different approach. "Do you remember anything else?" she asked. "Anything at all?" The form tilted its head. The movement was small, uncertain, like someone testing a limb that had been asleep for too long. "Stone," it said. Emily waited. "Cracking," the form added, almost surprised by the word. "Wait," it added sadly. Emily felt a strange tightness. "Did something break?" she asked, then immediately regretted the directness. The form faltered, the mist thickened, drawing inward, and the suggestion of shoulders curved slightly, as though bracing. Emily raised a hand. "You don't have to answer. I'm sorry. I'm not very good at this." The form did not respond at once. Then, as though on replay, it asked again, "Have you seen Oren?" Emily flinched, starting to feel hopeless. "No, I don't know Oren." She looked up at the cathedral ceiling, took a breath, and voiced her thoughts. "This stonework is amazing, so old and detailed, even if broken." Something of a smile came from the form. Yes, stone has a way of expressing itself when held just right. Emily looked back at the form. The voice was clearer this time, even though the words had not changed. The form shifted and looked at her again. "Why are you here?" Emily startled, the strangeness of the question catching her off guard. She thought for a moment, then answered anyway. "I don't know," she said honestly. "You seemed alone, lost." The words shifted something. Emily could not name it, but the space seemed to open a little, leaving her with the quiet sense that she was no longer intruding. Emily stayed for a while after that. Not long. She remained conscious of time, of work waiting, of the river and the road and the life she had only stepped out of briefly. She spoke a little, carefully, avoiding questions. She told the form about the beans she picked yesterday, about how the baskets always weighed more on the second day than the first. The form listened. When Emily paused, uncertain whether she was rambling, the form said quietly, "Go on." When she finally stood to leave, the form did not ask her to stay. It also did not follow, nor did it fade. It simply remained, just as it had before, anchored to stone and mist in the quiet, unyielding patience of waiting. By the time Emily reached the road, she knew she would return. Not because she believed she could help, but because leaving felt increasingly like something she would have to justify. Wanting to return, she soon learned, was not the same as being able to. The work did not loosen its grip simply because something had changed inside her. Beans still needed picking, bundles still needed tying. The baskets filled again, as they always did, and her arms learned the weight as each day stretched longer than the last. When the next delivery finally came due, Emily felt the relief of it like a small, guilty pleasure. She did not hurry. She did not invent reasons. She let the work justify her presence on the road, let the baskets excuse her steps. She stopped beneath the old tree again, though she knew she did not need to. She stood there for a moment, letting her breath slow, letting the shape of the day shift before moving on. The river crossing had become familiar enough that she no longer thought of it as a crossing. Her feet knew where to step, her hands bracing without conscious thought where needed. She followed the animal path without pausing, crept along the cliff, and reached the carved entry with a steadiness that surprised her. Hesitation still came, perhaps it always would, but it no longer stopped her. Inside, the form was waiting. It turned as she entered the light-faded interior, its outline responding to her arrival. "You came," it said. Something in the words warmed, just slightly, more than just recognition this time. "I said I might," Emily replied, then winced. "I mean, I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it." The form tilted, testing the idea. "That counts," it said after a moment. Emily laughed, a soft sound that echoed gently against the stone. She pressed her lips together, slightly embarrassed, and looked down at her hands. She did not ask questions this time. Instead, she spoke. Not with care or formality, she just spoke. She told the form about the book she had recently read, not the whole story, just the part that had stayed with her. A description of stone halls hidden beneath sand, of hands carving places where people might rest out of the heat. As she spoke, she felt something change. Subtly, the form grew a more defined edge, as though her words had given it something solid to lean against. "Stone," the form murmured wistfully, almost to itself. Emily paused, waited and watched without pressure. The form hesitated a little longer before finding another word. "Shaping." It glanced down toward the vague suggestion of hands, as though seeing them for the first time. As it studied them, they grew more defined, palms and fingers emerging, still blurred but unmistakably there. Emily's breath caught. So many questions rising and left unsaid. Instead, she spoke of another book, of an old stone castle, and a prince too brave for this world. The form listened. When Emily finally stopped, self-conscious again, the shape before her shifted. The outline sharpened, the suggestion of shoulders settled into something more certain. A curve of a hip, a tilt of a head, not fully human, but closer. "I shaped places," the form said quietly, "for others." Something in the voice had softened. Emily swallowed. "Homes?" The mist stirred, then steadied. "Yes." The word carried with it a sense of pride. Emily closed her eyes briefly, like it might help her hold the moment without dropping it. She stayed longer than she should have that day, long enough for the light at the entrance to change angle, long enough for the air to cool. When she finally stood, reluctant and aching, the form did not ask her to remain. But it did watch her go. On the fourth visit, the change was undeniable. The shape that waited in the cavern was no longer only an outline. There were features now, softened by mist, but present. A face that suggested itself without fully forming. Eyes that did not reflect light, but held it. Emily stopped short, breath catching. "You're different," she said, then immediately grimaced. "I mean, not different, just more." The form regarded her, the shape and voice now unmistakably feminine. "I feel more," it said slowly. "I think." Emily nodded, her heart tightening as she stood there, suddenly uncertain, aware of a new awkwardness, a problem she had not anticipated. She could not keep calling the form "you." The word felt too small now, too general. She shifted her weight, cleared her throat, felt foolish, but continued anyway. This might sound strange," she began, then stopped. Everything she said lately sounded strange. "I keep wanting to call you something, a name." The form did not object, it only waited. "I don't know your name," Emily continued quickly, "and I don't think you do either, so this wouldn't be real, just something for now." The mist stilled, as if listening more closely now. Emily hesitated, then spoke the name she knew only from stories, a name that did not belong in Edgefield and had been quietly circling her thoughts. "Elowen." The form repeated it slowly, testing the sound as though tasting something unfamiliar but not unpleasant. "Elowen." The mist eased, the shape steadied. "I like that," Elowen said. Emily's muscles loosened. "It doesn't have to be true," Emily said. "Just yours for now." Elowen inclined her head. "For now," she agreed. The names settled into the space between them. Emily realized quietly that the life she had known had closed and something else had begun. Some things could be unseen, some moments might still pass for dreams. But this had a name now, and without quite knowing when it had happened, she had stepped closer, not just into the place, but towards the one who stood within it.